Hello, and welcome back to the Physiology of singing. Yeah! And this is Laryngeal Physiology Part D. Okay? Part 2. So if you, once again, I hope you've reviewed your anatomy, because I really kind of just don't want to bother getting into it. I could, but let's talk big picture physiology. Excuse me, what do you need to know about your larynx as a singer? Because people talk about the details a lot, and do all singing students find that helpful? No. Do some? Yes. But do all? No. It can get really confusing out there. What do you need to know to help your voice? That's what this is about. So, I'm going to use as my visuals, because I'm not one of those nifty YouTubers who can create cool little vidges of everything, with little drawings and stuff. I'm not that person. So, using this textbook o' mine, I'm going to use some visuals from that textbook. I also have a cool visual that I got off of Amazon. I'm so excited about it. Anyway, so, to start off with, we're going to take a look, oh Lord, over here, right, left. It's kind of tough on this. Okay. So this is the front, as you see, frontal section view of the larynx. Okay, so what this means is as if somebody came, I'm going to mark this other page real quick here. Hold on. Okay. If somebody, if you essentially cut, say, an anatomical model, let's say, and you cut it right here, and you just, remove this frontal part, and you're just seeing right down the middle of the larynx right here. Okay? So, what I want you to notice, there's a few things here. The gray area, let me get a better visual. Okay. The gray area is air. That's open space. It's a cavity, okay? It's not bone, it's just a cavity. This yellowy area here and down here, down there, and on the other side, that's cartilage. So this is the cricoid cartilage, just to give you some anatomical landmarks. Cricoid cartilage and thyroid cartilage off to the side. All the pink stuff is tissue, okay? Is other types of tissue, not cartilage. Softer tissue. Muscles, tendons, ligaments, things like that. Okay, so, here we go. All right, trying to get this down. Okay, so the air cavity below, down here, this is the subglottal region. Sub being under, beneath. Glottal being the opening between the vocal folds, okay? So you see this is an open glottis, this little space right here between these vocal folds. So these are the true vocal folds right here, okay? And these guys up above are the ventricular folds, or the false vocal folds, which I'm not going to really get into too much because people do use them to phonate, but it tends to be associated with vocal disorders. So since we're talking about I'm going to talk regular healthy vocal fold function. I kind of don't want to get into false folds right now. But what I want you to notice, subglottal cavity down here. Supraglottal, meaning above that glottal opening, is up here, okay? And I want you to notice that it's very much hourglassy type shaped, right? Other than those ventricular folds hanging out in there, it's kind of like a complicated hourglass, right? Like a schmancy one. Okay. So that's important to keep in mind as I talk about aerodynamics, airflow, air pressure, all that lovely stuff. This is the side view. Whoa, hello. Okay, side view, like that kind of view. Over here, vocal folds are straight in the middle right there. That's the thyroid cartilage here, cricoid cartilage down there, subglottal space, supraglottal space, okay? And then up here is the back view behind. This is the epiglottis right here. Or wait, is it? Yes, epiglottis is up here, this little doodad of her, which we're also not going to talk too much about. The epiglottis is a piece of cartilage that just flaps down during swallow. It doesn't, it might play a role maybe with some, resonance stuff, but it would play a passive role because it's a piece of cartilage. So if it moves because muscles contracted in such a way that made it move. So I don't want to talk too much about that kind of passive force at the moment. Okay, so what it means when we're looking at that hourglassy shape is it can be kind of wheedled down to this, and this is why I didn't draw it, because there's better drawings than I can do. But, oh boy, can you see that? Here we go. Here it is. Okay, so see those little air molecules underneath? And you see the vocal folds are together. They're adducted. They're closed. The glottis is closed, not open. In the one over here, whoop, going the wrong way, over here, prephonation phase right here. So pressurization, air molecules build up underneath the vocal folds, and the vocal folds are together to allow that air pressure to build up. It says tracheal air pressure because it's coming from your lungs. This is your trachea, okay, below the vocal folds. And then you see the release. Whoop, scooch over here. The vocal folds start to move apart due to the air pressure pressing on them, essentially. Those air molecules flow through, and it says you have a noise burst, essentially, through that, because there's not a cycle yet. It's not a sound wave until there's a cycle. Well, scratch that. It could be a sound wave, but it's not a periodic sound wave, like a pitch, like an actual frequency, until there is a cycle of vibration set into place, okay? So, cycle of vibration. There's another one in here, last thing, and then I'm going to get to the other little visual here. This is essentially one single cycle of vibration, okay? So, air pressure builds up here. It starts to open the vocal folds. Then as the glottis opens, the air flows through the open glottis, okay? The vocal folds can now, you might have a fully open glottis, essentially, at the end of this top here, is a fully open glottis during a cycle of vibration. And then your vocal folds start to come back together again because of the air pressure differential here, essentially. They'll start to come back together, and then when they make contact, the cycle starts to repeat. So they'll go together, and then the air pressure starts to build up again, okay? So, am I going to talk about Bernoulli effect? No, I am not. You know why? Because the Bernoulli effect actually isn't how they open and close. What they open and close from, what the vocal folds open and close from, is the pressure differential from subglottal pressure and supraglottal pressure, and then the elasticity of the cover on the vocal folds. So the tissue that covers your vocal folds, there's actually different layers of it, and the layers have different tissue makeups, so mostly to help with impact, So like the very outer layer, the epithelial layer is, and essentially what you kind of see if you see a visual of vocal folds vibrating. It's very elastic. It's watery, like jiggles around. It's like watery jello, okay, on top of your vocal folds. And as you go deeper in, things get a little more dense, which is to help with impact. And you can think of it like this. It's kind of like a mattress. If you ever go mattress shopping, right, and you're trying to find a nice mattress to lay on, a lot of mattresses, even like the fancy foam ones these days, they have like a softer layer on the top so that if you just lay still on it, you don't get your pressure points on your body to feel dispersed. You don't feel like, oh man, my hip really hurts laying on my side on a softer mattress. But they have denser layers deeper into the mattress so that the weight gets dispersed, so it's not like you sink straight into the mattress, right? Like if you're in a cheap hotel room or something and you have that stinky, super uber soft mattress, they're terrible. The ones where you like roll toward the center, that doesn't have enough density to like let everybody, to kind of keep you leveled off, right? So vocal folds are structured a little like that. They are a little like a pillow top mattress, essentially, okay? And your mucosal covering is like your pillow top, and deeper in is like the harder foam underneath that pillow top, helping with impact, helping to, the soft stuff takes the brunt of the impact and then sends it into the denser layers, and then the denser layers just kind of take it. They take the brunt of it. Kind of cool, right? I might be talking a little fast because I get kind of jazzed about this stuff and I'm kind of going somewhere. So if I'm a little fast, you can pause it and go back. But this is important to remember. So vocal fold vibration is set into vibration by the air pressure. Okay. it maintains vibration as long as you have air coming from your lungs through the vocal folds and the adductors are, you know, keeping the vocal folds together a bit. It maintains itself, it maintains vibration due to the elasticity of the vocal fold tissue, so that watery, jello-y pillow top layer, and the air pressure, the aerodynamics, essentially, of the subglottal and supraglottal regions of the vocal tract, okay? So, our vocal tract, I guess, trachea, laryngeal system, okay? So, you don't need Bernoulli, though. Bernoulli is a lateral pressure thing, and a very good physicist told me once that essentially if there was Bernoulli occurring in the voice, then there would be no explanation for how the vocal folds come back apart during a cycle of vibration, which might seem like a little detail that's not really that important. So if you want to keep talking about Bernoulli, that's fine. My only complaint about it is I think people use Bernoulli as a way to either, one, sound really smart because there's like this named law in physics that explains it, and you sound super wicked snot if you talk about it. And two, the thing that I really don't like that much about is that I think it's the way people mystify it. You know, they think of like vocal fold vibration as being this mystical, magical, you know, thing that could only really be understood by the most, you know, brilliant minds in physics or whatever. And I only don't like that because, yeah, it's true. Like, if you're a physicist and you're studying vocal fold vibration, super complex, tons of math, you can like do all kinds of detailed analysis and find all kinds of stuff, and yeah, for sure. But on the practical level of singing, like at the broad, healthy voice level, do you need to worry about that level in order to learn how to sing? Obviously not. I mean, we didn't have that level of knowledge back in Mozart's day, and people sang then, right? Like, people have been singing for centuries without that knowledge. So clearly, it's not vital to learning how to sing, but what it is, I think, if you kind of demystify it as like this thing, this mystical thing that you have to somehow figure out how to control, I think that's the danger zone right there. You don't have to figure out how to control it. It's a thing that happens, you know? The air builds up, like the adductors close the vocal folds, the air builds up underneath them, the air pressure, air molecules get pushed there, and they just kind of push their way through because the air up above the vocal folds, the air pressure is different. There's a differential there. And then as that air goes through, there is a certain, here's a physics law for you, inertia, the law of inertia. So above it, the air column, those air molecules have a certain inertia, which is the property of essentially an object in motion wants to stay in motion, and conversely, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. It's a Newtonian law. So inertia means essentially as those air molecules build up and those vocal folds are together, the air above that is inert, like it's resting essentially. Those air molecules aren't really moving around very much, and they want to stay that way. So they have to be acted upon by an external force, being the other molecules coming through the glottis, being your force that sets those air molecules into motion. Okay? So with the balance of those two things, okay, it's kind of a seesaw, back and forth. Build up of air molecules underneath, then the air blows through, that sets the still air molecules into vibration above the vocal folds, and the air pressure changes up there. The vocal folds, the elasticity, that jello-y like stuff wants to go back together because that's the way it started, right? Like you poke a jello mold, it just kind of, it wants to go back to being a jello mold. It'll kind of be like this, and then it goes back to being its little mold over time. It's essentially what's happening with your vocal folds. So they want to be like this, they get blown open, woo, and then they're like, let's go back because now we got this higher air pressure up here. Got the air flow going, which really gave those air molecules up there the push that they needed to get going, and then the air molecules have released from under here, so they start to come back together that way. And then they get stuck back together, and they're like, yay, we're back in our original jello mold configuration. I'm just going to call it a jello mold. What the heck? when using an analogy, go all in, even if it doesn't work, right? Just go all in. Okay. And then it starts over again, because now that they're closed, more buildup. There it goes. Okay. So with that in mind, this is my nifty little visual. It's the coolest, like, little thing. I got it on Amazon. It's a 5-minute timer, essentially. I'm guessing that these red bubbles are essentially either plastic beads or gel beads of some kind, probably in some sort of oil. I don't know, probably something cheap, right? This was not a very expensive thing to get. It's all plastic. But notice, you can think of this as a bit like the larynx. Oh my gosh. And these red guys are essentially your air. That's your air molecules building up from your lungs as that air gets pushed out of your lungs. And if you had, I mean, obviously we don't have vocal folds. Essentially, that's what we don't have in this case, so nothing's closing here. But it builds up underneath this little opening, and then they're able to push their way through. And actually, I was actually a little surprised, because what you do see is a little bit of a burst, right? If you notice, as they go up, there is sort of this constant trickle, but there's occasional bursts of more of those little red doodads going up there. And I'm not a physicist, so I don't know if I might be totally off on this, but all I can think, because those bursts would be sort of synonymous with the burst of air molecules coming through the vocal folds that create the sound wave, okay? Actual physical bursts of air molecules, kind of. I mean, you know, there would be more of a chain reaction of this pushing that and this pushing that for a sound wave. But, so this is not a sound wave. This is just little red beads floating around in their oil or something. But my guess is whatever substance they're in, which I think is probably some kind of an oil, that substance probably has a certain amount of inertia to it. So when they push their way through, they displace a bit of that oil, and then the oil sort of resets back to its little resting state, and then it has to sort of, you know, you need a buildup of pressure under here for it to push its way through again. That's just my guess, though. I'm really not a physicist, so I might be totally off on that as to why this would create little bursts of those red beads. But it's pretty cool if it is, because that shows you the importance of the inertia. If that is the case, I think it's kind of cool, because it's like, oh, that's the power of inertia. It really does help keep things in this bursty kind of mode where you need this balance of air pressure building up and then releasing, right? And then building up and then releasing and then building up and then releasing. Okay? Which is kind of neat. And that's the importance of the supraglottal area, which tends to be ignored, I think, in a lot of pedagogy. We focus a lot on subglottal and adduction. A lot, right? Supraglottal is also pretty darn important. Why is this important for me to bring up? Well, because the supraglottal area is where people overconstrict. If you've, like 9 times out of 10, at least, if you have like any sort of muscle tension imbalance and you feel a lot of effort in your throat, there's probably too much supraglottal squeeze. So if the air pressure balance, essentially, the air pressure airflow balance that you should have for nice vibration is a little off, or you have like too much coming from down here, like you're really shoving it through there, your body's going to try to respond by balancing this out, and it might squeeze up here to do so, to create a little pressure differential up there, so that it better facilitates cycling, because your body's not like this plastic thing. It's flexible. It can respond to whatever you're telling it to do, even if it doesn't feel super great. You know what I mean? Because we've all done that, right? We've all done that, like, ah! Oh god, that does not feel good at all, right? Like oh, I did something. Okay. And for me, especially with muscle tension secondary to paresis, I definitely had too much squeeze happening up there. Oh, show! All right, so that's one of the things to look out for. So when I talk about effort in the throat, this, like vocal fold cycling, just natural voice vocal fold vibration, isn't something we're very aware of. It's not something we perceive here, right? If you have nice, easy, relaxed voice, you probably don't even notice your throat, right? And how many of us have seen those videos of the great singers out there being like, when I'm really on, I don't even feel my throat. And then if you're like me, you're like, man, what the heck? What does that even mean? How do you not feel your throat? You're supposed to feel your throat, right? Well, you're actually not, because what it means is you have sensation in your throat, absolutely. Your brain is getting that information. But if it's all working in this nice, easy, balanced way here, your perceptual part of your brain, that awareness part, doesn't need to know about it. It just doesn't need to know about it. It's just like, okay, you know, we're voicing. I told that motor center to make it voice, and it seems to be going well. Huzzah! And it just like stops paying attention, essentially there. Okay? But if you have excess effort, you tend to start to pay attention. And the danger of having excess effort for a prolonged period of time is that your brain will still stop paying attention to something if it's just kind of default, if it's the habit. It'll just stop paying attention, even though it's still there. So for me, when I had my muscle tension, I had constant muscle tension. I had it in my talking, I had it in my singing, I had it in my high voice, I had it in my low voice, I had it all the time. That's what makes it muscle tension dysphonia. That's why it was a problem. I had strain in my voice all the time. So if somebody said, it should feel as easy as talking, I'd be like, well, it does feel like talking, so I must be doing something right. And it's like, actually, no, my talking is strained, you know? My default voice setting is always effortful, right? At the time. And so to break that habit, I had to go to therapy to learn what easy voicing felt like. You know what I mean? But that's where, like, if your singing voice always feels more effortful than your speaking voice in sort of a strained kind of way, maybe it's just your high range, maybe it's your middle range, wherever it is, that means that that balance, that air pressure underneath and air pressure above is just not quite, and, you know, that whole inertia thing, it's all kind of out of balance, essentially. So here's my analogy that I came up with a few days ago that I feel fairly good about. I think it'll work out. Bear with me. So if you think back to, like, when you're on a seesaw in a playground, okay? We're going to use a seesaw analogy, folks. So think back to either your childhood or your drunken days as a high school student and or college student, spending late nights in a park, right? Because, like, we know you guys did that. Anyway, thinking back, or if you're a parent and you have little kids and you've been on a seesaw recently as an adult with a kid, this is even better. So as a seesaw aficionado, which I don't do very often anymore. I used to love the seesaw, though, when I was little, right? And if you're on it with someone of a similar size to you, similar, you know, height, similar body weight, it's really easy to keep that seesaw going, right? I mean, not like, you know, playground seesaws aren't totally in balance. They're not like a scale, but it's easy to keep it going, relatively, right? If you're on that seesaw and you're the taller person, say you're the adult to a little kid on a seesaw, you know you have to work pretty hard as the adult, right? The kid is just like, whee! But you have to really control things with your legs because you don't want the kid to just like collapse down. And they can't push off enough to really get you up. So you know you have to use a little bit of your strength to do that, right? And so it's like that person's always working, right? The heavier, taller adult is always working. The little kid is just like, whee, when their legs are off the ground because they don't have to work hardly and they barely have to push because you're doing a lot of the effort for them. So think about glottal, like laryngeal, glottal airflow, air pressure, subglottal air pressure, balance. Think of that as a bit like a seesaw. So if it's a little out of balance, there's going to be some part of your body, either in the respiratory area, below the vocal folds, the subglottal area, or the supraglottal, or more likely a little bit of both, will respond and try to make the seesaw still work, okay? It's still going to want this up and down because you want voice. You want the vocal folds to cycle, right? So it'll still want that to happen, and it can will it to happen by being like the adult on the playground, really trying really hard to keep it going, okay? That's effort. That's vocal effort. That's excess effort, okay? We call that excess effort typically in therapy, and I think it's a useful term just in general. So excessive vocal effort is like the seesaw is a little out of balance. You got a little kid and their dad or something, a big adult, and the adult has to do most of the work, right? Not so fun. Easy voicing. Like easy, relaxed, does not feel increased effort. Voicing, where you're that singer who's like, I don't even notice my throat when I'm singing well. For those people, it means being on a seesaw with someone of the similar height, similar weight, and it's just this fun up and down. Nobody has to spend a lot of excess effort to keep it going. It just feels good, you know? So, that's easy voicing. And, you know, when you change vocal range, when you go up pitches, your vocal folds change their tension, the amount that they vibrate changes, you know, the pattern of vibration changes, all that stuff. Yes, that's true. You can still have vocal ease in different ranges, though. And I think that that is where the difficulty of training singing comes in, honestly, because you want that ease, and you want the ease to be so habitual, way up high in your voice and way down low throughout your range. You want this nice, easy voicing so that you can move very flexibly throughout your vocal range without introducing increased effort into your singing, right? That is enough challenge in and of itself. I mean, that takes a long time. Okay, so, but to encourage, let's actually, this is already kind of long, so let's do a third video on laryngeal anatomy, talking a little bit about how to encourage this easy, balanced seesaw process of air pressure, airflow, versus laryngally, versus the imbalanced seesaw of you're having to work really hard to keep that seesaw going, okay? So I'll do that on the next video. I'll just do it right now. I'm going to bust it out. Woohoo! Because I know it's been a while and I really need to get some videos up. All right. So I will see you next time. See you guys. Bye. Bye.